Look at the
Everyone at
janitor.
Westbridge Military Academy ignored
Need
the
any
old
help with
maintenance
that heavy
worker,
lifting, old
pushing a
timer?
cart beneath the wall of honor.
Don't
They
strain
mocked him,
yourself now.
stepped over his work, and never knew he carried a name buried for 20 years. But when a security drill turned real, the old man moved like a soldier the academy had tried to erase. Then one general heard a forgotten call sign from the past, Gray Lantern, and the entire hall went silent. Where are you watching from today? Share your thoughts below, and please like and subscribe to help us reach 1,000 subscribers. The morning sun spilled across the brick buildings of Westbridge Military Academy, painting long shadows over the parade grounds where young cadets marched in perfect formation. Their boots struck the pavement in rhythm, sharp and disciplined, echoing through the campus like a heartbeat. Along the main corridor hung portraits of decorated officers, war heroes, and commanders whose names had become legends within military circles. Beneath those framed faces, another man moved quietly through the hall. Walter Hayes pushed a maintenance cart across the polished floor. At 58 years old, Walter looked like a man who had spent his life carrying burdens heavier than anyone should. He stood around 5 feet 10 inches tall, lean but solid, with broad shoulders that had not completely surrendered to age. Deep lines marked his weathered face. His short gray hair was trimmed close, and a rough salt and pepper beard covered his jaw. His gray eyes were the most striking thing about him, sharp, observant eyes that seemed to measure every doorway, every window, every person who walked past. Most people never noticed. To the cadets, Walter was just the old maintenance worker, invisible. A group of young men rounded the corner, laughing among themselves. At their center was Ryan Holt, the Academy's top-performing cadet. 22 years old, tall and athletic, Ryan carried himself with the confidence of someone who had never truly failed. His sandy blonde hair was neatly trimmed, and his green eyes reflected both ambition and pride. Coming from a respected military family, Ryan had grown up believing excellence was measured by medals, rank, and achievement. As Ryan walked past, he deliberately stepped across the section Walter had just finished mopping. Dirty footprints appeared on the floor. Several cadets laughed. "Sorry, old man," one joked. Ryan smirked. "Guess you'll have to earn your paycheck twice today." Walter simply nodded and continued mopping. No anger, no reaction. Yet, as Ryan disappeared down the corridor, Walter's eyes briefly followed him, not with resentment, with assessment. The same way a hunter might study movement in the woods. A sudden shout echoed from the stairwell nearby. One of the younger cadets lost his footing and slipped backward down several steps. Before anyone else reacted, Walter moved. His mop handle shot forward. The falling cadet instinctively grabbed it. Walter planted his boots, absorbing the momentum and stopping the young man from tumbling farther. The entire motion took less than a second. The cadet blinked in surprise. "Thanks," Walter simply nodded. Most of the witnesses assumed it had been luck. One person didn't. Emma Doyle stood near the administration office holding a tablet under her arm. At 24, Emma was one of the Academy's youngest cybersecurity specialists. She had intelligent hazel eyes, freckles across her nose, and auburn hair tied in a low ponytail. Unlike many people at Westbridge, Emma paid attention to details others ignored, and she had begun noticing Walter. The old maintenance worker always seemed to know things before anyone else. Broken locks, faulty alarms, structural problems hidden behind walls. It wasn't normal. As Walter pushed his cart away, Emma found herself watching him. For a brief moment, Walter glanced toward a fire exit at the end of the hallway, not casually, instinctively, like someone checking an escape route. The thought lingered in Emma's mind long after he disappeared around the corner. Later that afternoon, announcements echoed across the campus. "Attention all personnel. Preparations for General Marcus Vane's arrival will begin immediately." The Academy stirred with excitement. General Marcus Vane was more than a decorated officer. At 64 years old, he was a military icon. Tall, silver-haired, and commanding, Vane had survived Operation Black Harbor 20 years earlier, a mission still taught in leadership courses throughout the country. Cadets admired him. Officers respected him. History celebrated him. As the announcement continued, Walter stopped in front of a wall displaying photographs from famous operations. The name Black Harbor echoed through the speaker. For a fraction of a second, his hand tightened around the cart handle. His expression didn't change, but something moved behind his eyes. A memory, a wound, a ghost, and then it was gone. As Walter turned away from the display, something slipped from a stack of maintenance supplies inside his cart. A faded photograph landed face up on the floor. Emma happened to be walking past. She bent down to pick it up. The image showed 6 young soldiers standing beside a helicopter under heavy rain. Their faces were partially damaged by age and water stains. One figure had been scratched out completely. Before Emma could study it further, Walter took the photograph from her hand. His calm expression suddenly seemed colder. "Old picture," he said quietly. But Emma noticed something strange. His hand was trembling, only for a moment. Then it stopped. For the first time, she wondered whether the old maintenance worker was hiding something much larger than a forgotten photograph. That evening, Walter crossed the campus after most cadets had returned to their dormitories. He stopped outside the training field. Several cadets were still practicing under floodlights. Among them was Lucas Bell. Unlike Ryan, Lucas rarely drew attention to himself. 21 years old, with dark brown hair and thoughtful eyes, he possessed a quiet steadiness that many mistook for weakness. He wasn't the fastest or strongest cadet, but he listened more than he spoke. Walter watched him from a distance. The resemblance was impossible to ignore. The eyes, the posture, the way he tilted his head while thinking. Lucas reminded Walter of someone he had spent 20 years trying not to remember, a man named Samuel Bell. The floodlights reflected in Walter's eyes as old memories threatened to surface again. He turned away. Minutes later, Walter entered a small archive building hidden behind the academy library. Inside, shelves stretched from floor to ceiling, packed with decades of military records. Waiting for him was Evelyn Hart. At 67 years old, Evelyn carried herself with quiet dignity. Her silver hair framed a gentle but intelligent face, and her gray eyes revealed the burden of secrets carried for far too long. "You heard the announcement," Evelyn said softly. Walter nodded. "Marcus Vane is coming." Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Evelyn lowered her voice. "When they begin digitizing the remaining Black Harbor files, some things may come back to the surface." Walter stared toward the dark window. Outside, distant lights glowed across the campus. "I know." Evelyn studied him carefully. "If the truth comes out, you can't remain invisible forever." A faint smile appeared on Walter's face. Not amusement, resignation. "I never came here to be seen." His gaze drifted toward the training field where Lucas had been practicing. "I came here to make sure the boys stayed alive." Silence filled the archive room. Neither needed to explain who he meant. Outside, the academy continued preparing for the arrival of a celebrated hero. Inside, an old man stood surrounded by forgotten records and buried memories. And somewhere within those memories, a name long erased from official history waited to be remembered: Gray Lantern. By sunrise, Westbridge Military Academy had changed its rhythm. The usual sound of marching boots was still there, but beneath it ran something sharper: preparation. Flags were being pressed, ceremonial chairs arranged, security checkpoints tested, and every hallway polished until the old brick buildings looked ready to host history itself. General Marcus Vane would arrive within 24 hours, and the academy wanted no flaw visible under the eyes of visiting officers, donors, and press. Walter Hayes moved through that noise with his maintenance cart, unseen as always, but his mind had not left the archive room. Black Harbor, Vane, Lucas Bell. The name Gray Lantern still sat in his chest like a piece of shrapnel that had never worked its way out. In the basement server room, Emma Doyle sat before 3 monitors, her auburn hair tied low, her sharp hazel eyes narrowed behind the glow of encrypted files. Emma was not the kind of woman who accepted closed doors simply because someone had placed a badge on them. She had grown up the daughter of a small-town mechanic who taught her that machines only lied when people made them lie. That lesson shaped her more than any degree. If a system made a strange sound, hid a strange file, or denied access at the wrong time, Emma listened. And now Westbridge's old archive system was whispering. The file was still there: Lantern Return Log. It should not have existed inside a public transition batch. Operation Black Harbor was listed as a historical leadership case study. But this file had no educational tag, no declassification marker, no clean transfer path. It was buried under obsolete storage folders, wrapped in old encryption and corrupted metadata, as if someone had tried to erase it long ago but lacked the courage to destroy it completely. Emma tried another recovery sequence. A warning flashed red. Access restricted. A voice spoke behind her. "That file is outside your assignment, Miss Doyle." Emma turned. Major Colin Rusk stood in the doorway, motionless and exact. At 45, he was a compact, controlled man with a narrow face, close-cropped dark blonde hair, cold gray eyes, and the posture of someone who preferred rules because rules could be used as weapons. His olive security uniform was immaculate, black duty belt aligned, radio earpiece fitted so cleanly it looked like part of him. "I'm auditing the archive transfer," Emma said, keeping her tone professional. This file triggered a corruption alert. Then mark it as corrupted and move on. That is not procedure. Russ stepped inside. Procedure is whatever protects this academy from unnecessary exposure. Emma noticed the word exposure. Not damage, not failure, exposure. Before she could answer, Rusk reached past her and closed the file window with 2 taps. General Vine's visit is not the time to chase ghosts. Emma met his eyes. I didn't mention ghosts. For the first time, something almost human flickered across his face. Irritation. Then it vanished. Upstairs, Ryan Holt was preparing his cadet security team for the upcoming demonstration. He stood tall in his fitted training uniform, sandy blonde hair trimmed to perfection, voice loud enough for every junior cadet to hear. Ryan liked command. He liked the feeling of others waiting for his next instruction. But beneath the confidence sat pressure he would never admit. His father, Colonel Andrew Holt, a stern retired officer with a square jaw and a habit of measuring affection through achievement, would be attending the ceremony. Ryan needed to look flawless. Lucas Bell stood at the back of the group, quiet as always. He was 21, lean, dark-haired, with warm brown eyes that carried more thought than words. Ryan mistook that silence for weakness. "Bell," he said, tossing him a training harness. "Try not to slow the team down tomorrow." Lucas caught it without complaint. Walter, changing a light panel nearby, saw the harness strap twisted across Lucas's shoulder. Without asking permission, he stepped down from the ladder and adjusted the strap so it would not cut into the collarbone under weight. Ryan laughed. "You taking tactical advice from the janitor now, Bell?" Lucas looked embarrassed, but Walter only tightened the buckle once and said, "Pain in the wrong place makes a man useless before the mission starts." Ryan's smile faded. The sentence sounded too practiced to belong to a janitor. As Walter turned to leave, Lucas touched the corrected strap and froze. For a second, the hallway noise seemed to fall away. "My father wrote something like that once," Lucas said quietly. Walter stopped, but did not turn around. Lucas continued, in his last letter. "He said a man can survive fear, but not a wound he pretends isn't there." Walter's hand closed around the ladder rail until his knuckles whitened. No one else saw it except Emma, who had just arrived at the end of the corridor. For the first time, she saw Walter not as a mystery, but as a man being pulled toward a grave he had spent 20 years avoiding. That night, Emma went to the old archive wing. Evelyn Hart was waiting behind the records desk, her cream cardigan buttoned neatly, silver hair tucked behind her ears, reading glasses hanging from a thin chain. At 67, Evelyn looked gentle, but her gray eyes had the quiet strength of someone who had guarded dangerous truths for half a lifetime. "You found Lantern return log," Evelyn said. Emma lowered her voice. "You know what it is, I know what it cost." Evelyn led her between shelves of old files. She explained only enough to deepen the danger. 20 years ago, Black Harbor had produced 2 histories. The official version, where command made hard decisions and survivors came home because of disciplined leadership. And the buried version, where men were left behind after someone decided their recovery would damage careers, contracts, and reputations. In that buried version was a call sign whispered by wounded men in smoke. Gray Lantern. Was Gray Lantern real? Emma asked. Evelyn looked toward the maintenance corridor where Walter's cart sat in shadow. Real enough that powerful men needed him dead on paper. Before Emma could ask more, a metallic click echoed from below. Someone was opening the restricted basement archive. Walter heard it too. He appeared from the dark hallway without a word and moved toward the stairwell. He did not run. Running made noise. Instead, he descended with the controlled calm of someone returning to terrain he already understood. By the time Emma and Evelyn reached the landing, the intruder was gone, forced out through a service exit after Walter cut power to one corridor and locked another from the mechanical side. On the floor lay a snapped access card fragment. Emma picked it up and read the partial code. Her face tightened. "This belongs to Academy Security." Walter looked at the broken plastic, then toward the server room beneath their feet. Rusk. Later, Emma returned to her workstation and used an offline recovery tool Evelyn had hidden years earlier. The file opened for only 6 seconds before collapsing back into static. A man's voice came through, hoarse and exhausted. "Lantern moving back. I still have 3 alive." Emma stopped breathing. Behind her, Walter stood in the doorway, his face pale under the fluorescent light. He looked older than he had that morning, as if the voice had taken 20 years from him in a single breath. Emma whispered, "That voice is yours." Walter did not deny it. He only looked across the dark campus toward the dormitory where Lucas Bell was sleeping and said, almost too softly to hear, "His father was one of the 3. By the next morning, Westbridge Military Academy looked flawless from the outside. The parade grounds were swept clean, the flags snapped in the cold wind, and the main hall had been dressed for ceremony with polished chairs, blue banners, and brass stands waiting for visiting officers. But beneath the surface, the academy felt wrong to Walter Hayes. He could hear it in the walls. A service elevator paused half a second too long between floors. A ventilation fan beneath the east wing pulsed unevenly. The basement doors clicked with a new rhythm, not the old mechanical rhythm he trusted, but the tighter sound of electronic control. Someone had changed the building overnight. General Marcus Vane arrived just after 9. He stepped from a black sedan in a dark formal uniform heavy with medals, tall and silver-haired, his lined face composed for cameras. At 64, Vane still carried the shape of command. Straight back, measured steps, eyes that knew how to hold a room. Cadets admired him before he even spoke. Ryan Holt stood in the honor line, jaw tight, uniform perfect, desperate to look like the kind of officer his father could praise without criticism. Lucas Bell stood 2 places behind him, quiet, observant, still unsettled by the words Walter had spoken the night before. Walter remained near the service entrance with his maintenance cart. Invisible men had the best view of powerful ones. When Vane walked past, the general's eyes brushed over Walter once, then returned sharply, as if some old instinct had tugged at him. Walter lowered his gaze. For 1 second, the air between them tightened with something neither man was ready to name. Then Major Colin Rusk stepped forward and guided Vane toward the reception line, his cold gray eyes briefly cutting toward Walter like a warning. The security drill began before the afternoon ceremony. Officially, it was simple. Simulate a partial power failure, secure the dignitary route, protect the archive wing, and evacuate selected cadets through approved exits. Ryan led the cadet response team with clipped confidence, calling orders exactly as the manual prescribed. Emma Doyle monitored the systems from the control room, her laptop connected to the Academy's old archive network through a protected backup line Evelyn Hart had secretly provided. Emma's purpose was not just to watch the drill. She was trying to keep Lantern Return Log alive. At first, everything followed the script. Lights dimmed in the east corridor. Alarm indicators blinked amber. Cadets moved to positions. Then Emma saw a second command enter the system, hidden beneath the drill protocol. It did not come from the training console. It came from inside Academy security. The basement archive locks sealed. A deletion sequence started. Emma's breath caught. "No," she whispered. "He's not simulating a breach. He's using the drill to erase the file." At the same moment, smoke began pouring through the lower maintenance corridor. It was supposed to be harmless training fog, but too much of it was being released into the wrong section. Lucas and 2 junior cadets were down there checking auxiliary lights as part of Ryan's team. Their comms broke into static. Ryan heard the first broken transmission and stiffened. "Bell, report," only coughing answered. The cadets looked to Ryan. For the first time that day, his confidence cracked. He ordered the team toward the main stairwell, but the electronic lock rejected his clearance. He tried the second route. Sealed. His voice rose, sharper than before. "Control, open east access." Emma answered through the speaker. "I can't. The lockdown is being forced from security command." Rusk stood behind her in the control room, expression unreadable. "Continue the drill, Miss Doyle. Panic helps no one." Emma turned on him. "There are cadets trapped below, and there are protocols." The door opened before she could respond. Walter stepped in, face calm, eyes hard. He did not look at Rusk first. He looked at the floor plan on the central monitor. "That map is wrong," he said. Ryan's voice came through the radio, frustrated. "Who is that?" Walter pointed to a blank section beneath the east wing. "There's an old service crawl behind the boiler wall, built before the Academy modernized the locks. If the boys are near auxiliary lighting, they're 10 yards from it." Rusk snapped. "You are not authorized to direct emergency response." Walter finally looked at him. "Then authorize someone before they run out of air." Silence hit the room. From the speakers came a faint sound almost buried under static. 3 slow taps, a pause, then 2 more. Walter's face changed. Not fear, recognition. Lucas was not calling randomly. He was tapping an old distress rhythm, one Samuel Bell had used 20 years ago in Black Harbor. Emma saw Walter's hand move to his wrist, covering the curved scar beneath his sleeve, as if the wound had heard the signal too. In that moment, the past did not feel buried. It felt alive beneath the floor, knocking from the dark. Walter took the service keys from his belt and moved before Rusk could stop him. Ryan met him at the boiler corridor, sweat darkening his collar, anger and embarrassment fighting across his face. "You expect us to follow you?" "No." Walter said, opening a rusted panel. I expect you to decide whether pride matters more than bell breathing. Ryan said nothing after that. The crawl space was narrow, hot, and thick with smoke leaking through cracked vents. Walter moved with slow precision, conserving air, using touch where sight failed. Ryan followed behind, forced into silence by the old man's certainty. Above them, Emma fought the deletion sequence, rerouting power through a backup channel while Evelyn stood at her side, pale but steady, reading old archive labels to help identify which server housed the hidden file. Walter reached the basement corridor first. Lucas lay against a sealed steel door, one cadet beside him barely conscious, the other coughing into his sleeve. Lucas's eyes widened when he saw Walter through the smoke. How did you know? Walter knelt, wrapping a cloth over Lucas' mouth. His voice softened. Look at the light, not the smoke. Lucas froze. My father wrote that. Walter's jaw tightened, but he only pulled him up. Then listened to him. The steel door would not open electronically, so Walter used the manual release hidden behind a corroded plate. It took strength, leverage, and a knowledge of old construction no system could fake. When it gave way, Ryan helped drag the other cadets through. For the first time, he looked at Walter not with mockery, but with shaken confusion. In the control room, a security camera caught Walter lifting Lucas over a fallen pipe. His sleeve slid back, revealing the curved scar on his wrist. General Vane, watching from the observation area, went completely still. The metal ribbon in his hand slipped loose. He leaned toward the monitor, his face draining of color. No, he whispered. Gray Lantern died at Black Harbor. On the screen, Walter carried Lucas toward the light. The Academy tried to return to order before sunset, but the air inside Westbridge had changed. Cadets whispered in corners. Officers spoke in clipped tones. The official statement called the basement incident a training malfunction. Yet everyone who had seen Walter Hayes carry Lucas Bell through the smoke knew the word malfunction was too small for what had happened. Ryan Holt sat alone in the locker room with soot on his sleeve, staring at the floor. That morning, he had believed courage looked like a polished uniform and a perfect command voice. Now he could still hear Walter's quiet words in the smoke. Pride matters less than breathing. The thought burned worse than embarrassment. Lucas was cleared by the medical team with only minor bruises and smoke irritation, but his mind remained trapped below ground. When Walter had told him, "Look at the light, not the smoke," the words had struck something deeper than memory. His father, Samuel Bell, had written that same line in the final letter Lucas's mother kept in a cedar box. Lucas found Walter near the rear exit of the infirmary, standing in the fading light, sleeves pulled low over his wrists. You knew my father, Lucas said. It was not a question. Walter looked at the young man's face, the same brown eyes, the same quiet steadiness Samuel had carried even when the world was falling apart. I served with him, Walter said. Lucas swallowed. Did he suffer? The question landed harder than any accusation. Walter could have hidden behind classified history, behind silence, behind the habit that had kept him alive for 20 years. Instead, his voice softened. He was brave until the last second I saw him. Lucas waited for more, but Major Colin Rusk appeared at the corridor entrance before Walter could continue. Rusk's olive uniform was still immaculate, despite the day's chaos, his narrow face unreadable, his cold gray eyes moving from Lucas to Walter like a man counting threats. Mr. Hayes, he said, you are to remain away from all restricted areas until the review is complete. Walter did not answer. Rusk stepped closer. And you, Bell, should be careful whose stories you listen to. Old men carry old guilt. It does not make them honest. Lucas's expression hardened, but Walter touched his arm once, a silent warning not to respond. Across campus, Emma Doyle and Evelyn Hart worked inside the archive office behind a locked door. Emma's face was pale with exhaustion, but her hazel eyes remained fixed on the recovered file. Evelyn stood beside her, one thin hand resting on the back of a chair, silver hair neat despite the trembling in her fingers. The audio was damaged, but not gone. 6 seconds had become 16. 16 had become enough. There was Walter's voice. There was a command ordering withdrawal, and beneath the static there was another voice saying, seal the report. Emma looked up. If Rusk gets this server isolated, he'll destroy the chain of custody. Evelyn opened an old metal drawer and removed a thin envelope marked with a faded Black Harbor transfer code. Then we stopped waiting for permission. Inside the envelope was a witness roster. 3 names had not been listed in the public report. At the bottom of the roster, written in Samuel Bell's handwriting, was a sentence that made Evelyn cover her mouth. If Lantern survived, tell my son the light was real. Emma read it twice, then looked through the archive window toward the courtyard where Lucas sat alone. For a moment, the academy's bells rang for evening formation, but the sound felt less like routine and more like judgment. 20 years of silence had not erased the truth. It had only made the truth wait for the son who needed to hear it. That night, the ceremony for General Marcus Vane continued as planned. Westbridge's grand hall glowed under warm lights. Officers in dress uniforms filled the front rows. Donors and academy officials murmured behind them. General Vane stood near the stage, tall and silver-haired, but the confidence that had shaped his public image was cracking around the eyes. He had seen Walter's scar. He had seen the way the old man moved through smoke. He had spoken the name aloud in private, Gray Lantern. Now the name followed him like a footstep. Walter had been ordered to remain near the staff entrance, but Emma found him there. "They're going to bury this," she said. "Rusk is already calling it a procedural fault." Walter looked toward the stage. "Powerful men don't bury things because they're dead. They bury them because they're afraid they'll stand up." Before Emma could answer, a senior academy official took the podium and attempted to turn the day's disaster into a sentimental footnote. He was Dean Harold Whitcomb, a heavy-set man in his late 50s with thinning brown hair, soft hands, and the polished smile of someone who valued reputation more than truth. He praised the cadets, thanked security, then gestured toward the rear of the room. "And perhaps we should also acknowledge our maintenance employee, Mr. Walter Hayes, who assisted during today's confusion." A few polite claps scattered through the hall. Whitcomb smiled as if offering charity. "Mr. Hayes, they say soldiers have call signs. Did a man like you ever have one?" Some cadets chuckled. Ryan did not, his face flushed with shame. Lucas stood slowly. The hall quieted. Walter remained still for several seconds. Then he walked forward, not like a servant summoned for praise, but like a man returning to a place that had owed him the truth for 20 years. He stopped below the stage and looked at General Vine. "My call sign," Walter said, "was Gray Lantern." The silence was immediate. An elderly former officer in the front row rose unsteadily, his face drained of color. "I heard that name in Black Harbor," he whispered. "He came back for us." Emma stepped beside Walter and played the recovered audio through the hall speakers. "Lantern moving back. I still have 3 alive." Then came the other voice, broken by static, but clear enough. "Negative. Leave them. Seal the report." Major Rusk moved toward the side exit. 2 security officers blocked him when Emma announced that the deletion command had come from his authorization path. General Vane removed a medal from his chest with shaking hands. He stepped down from the stage and faced Walter. "I signed the report that said you died," Vane said, his voice breaking, "and I let them call me a hero." He bowed his head. For the first time in 20 years, the hall did not honor the man on the stage. It honored the man who had been sweeping beneath it. By morning, Westbridge Military Academy no longer looked untouched by history. The banners still hung in the grand hall, the chairs were still aligned in perfect rows, and the portraits of old commanders still watched from the walls. But something beneath the academy's polished surface had cracked open. Men who had spent their lives speaking about honor now whispered in offices. Cadets who had once passed Walter Hayes without seeing him stood aside when he entered a corridor. No one knew what to call him anymore. Janitor felt too small. Hero felt too late. Major Colin Rusk was removed before sunrise by federal military investigators. He did not shout as they escorted him out. Men like Rusk rarely broke in public. His face remained narrow and cold, his dark blonde hair neat, his olive uniform still pressed, but his silence had changed shape. It no longer looked like control. It looked like a wall collapsing inward. Emma Doyle watched from the archive window as he was led across the courtyard. She had not slept. Her auburn hair had loosened from its ponytail, and the freckles across her tired face seemed darker under the pale morning light, but her eyes remained steady. The recovered audio, access logs, and old witness roster had been copied, sealed, and transferred to investigators before Rusk could touch them again. General Marcus Vane requested to speak in the hall before leaving. He stood without medals now, only a dark uniform and an old man's exhaustion. The authority was still there in his height and silver hair, but the legend around him had thinned. He told the Academy that Operation Black Harbor would be reopened, that the official record had been incomplete, and that his name would be removed from the commemorative wall until the review was finished. He did not excuse himself. He did not blame dead superiors. He only said, "A lie can wear a uniform for a long time. That does not make it service." Walter stood near the back, hands folded before him, sleeves covering the scar on his wrist. He felt no triumph. Truth had finally reached the room, but Samuel Bell was still gone. The others were still gone. 20 years of silence had not saved them. It had only taught the living how heavy a buried name could become. Lucas Bell found him later in the maintenance storage room. The young cadet looked smaller without the crowd around him, his khaki uniform wrinkled at the sleeve, his brown eyes raw from questions he had carried since childhood. In his hands was a folded letter, yellowed at the edges. "My mother kept this," Lucas said. "She said my father wrote it before his last deployment." Walter looked at the paper but did not reach for it. Lucas opened it and read the line softly. "If you ever meet the man who carried the gray light, know that I followed it as far as I could." Walter closed his eyes. For a moment, the storage room seemed to disappear. Walter heard rain on metal, smoke alarms dying in the dark, Samuel Bell laughing once through pain because he did not want the younger men to be afraid. Then Lucas placed the letter in Walter's hands, and from inside the folded paper slipped a tiny pressed wildflower, brittle with age. Walter recognized it immediately. Samuel had picked the same kind of flower near the Black Harbor staging field and joked that if he made it home, he would bring one to his son. Walter had thought that small promise died with him. Yet here it was, 20 years later, fragile but still whole, as if mercy had survived where men had failed. Walter's voice broke when he finally spoke. "Your father was not alone." Lucas did not move. Walter told him what the official report never had. Samuel had been wounded, but conscious. He had helped guide 2 others toward Walter's signal light. When the corridor began to collapse, Samuel used the last of his strength to push Walter and the surviving men through the gap. Walter had tried to go back, but Samuel had ordered him not to waste the lives already saved. "He died giving others a way out," Walter said. "Not abandoned, not forgotten, not a line in a sealed report." Lucas wiped his face with the heel of his hand. "Then why did you stay here all these years?" Walter looked at him. "Because I could not save your father. But I could make sure his son was never alone in a place that taught men to worship names and forget souls." Later, Ryan Holt came to the main corridor carrying a mop and bucket. He had asked for them himself. His tall, athletic frame looked awkward beside the cleaning cart, and his green eyes no longer held the easy arrogance that had once made him cruel. He found Walter beneath the wall of honor. "I was wrong about you," Ryan said. "I was wrong about what strength looks like." Walter handed him a cloth. "Then start by cleaning what you walked over." Ryan nodded and knelt to scrub the floor where cadets had left muddy tracks the day before. Other cadets watched in silence. None laughed. By afternoon, Evelyn Hart opened one final archive box. Inside were photographs, witness notes, and the names of men erased from Black Harbor. Her lined face softened as she gave the box to Emma. "Memory is not history until someone brave enough carries it into the light," she said. A week later, Westbridge placed a small bronze plaque near the basement stairs. It did not mention politics or scandal. It read, "No one is left behind, even when the order forgets them." Above it, a new photograph was added to the wall of honor. Walter Hayes, as a younger man, smoked behind him, one hand gripping a gray signal light. Beneath the frame were the words, "Gray Lantern, the man who went back when everyone else was ordered to leave." Walter still came to work before sunrise. He still pushed the same cart. But when cadets passed him now, they stopped and saluted. Walter never asked for it. He only nodded, quiet as ever. Emma once asked if it made him feel seen at last. Walter looked down the corridor, where Lucas was leading younger cadets through emergency routes Ryan had once ignored. For the first time in years, the old man's face softened. "A man does not need the whole world to remember him," Walter said. "He only needs the truth not to be buried with the dead." Sometimes the miracle is not a thunder in the sky or a light breaking through the clouds. Sometimes the miracle is one forgotten truth surviving long enough to find the right voice. Walter Hayes spent 20 years walking unseen, carrying names the world had buried, carrying guilt that was never fully his to bear. But God has a way of bringing hidden things into the light. No lie stays buried forever when truth still has a witness. In our daily lives, we may pass people like Walter without ever knowing what they have survived. The quiet janitor, the tired veteran, the old neighbor, the single parent, the person who never asks for attention may be carrying a story of courage, sacrifice, and faith that no one has ever heard. This story reminds us to look deeper, speak kinder, and never measure a person's worth by their job, age, silence, or appearance. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to remember that God sees what the world overlooks. Leave a comment below and tell us about someone in your life who deserved more recognition than they ever received. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe to the channel and join us for more powerful stories of courage, loyalty, sacrifice, and truth. May God bless you, protect your family, strengthen your heart, and guide your steps wherever you are.